Hey, listeners, welcome back to the Dreadful Dialogue podcast. You're back with me, Alyse. Happy New Year. It's been a few weeks since we've had an episode, but I'm very excited because today with us, we have an actress that has been acting for well over 15 years, and she's been in the horror genre throughout much of her career. Not only is she an actress, she's also a writer, a producer, she's a documentarian, and I'm very excited to have her on the podcast today. And help me welcome Sadie Katz. How are you doing, Sadie?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
And Happy New Year. This is a crazy start of the new year. Los Angeles is burning. Things are happening. Such is life.
Yeah, we both live in SoCal, so it's a bit odd right now. It's definitely an odd time. I don't know when people will be listening to this, but we hope whoever is listening to it that it's not affecting you guys negatively.
Yeah.
And I hope everybody had a good holiday season. Whatever you celebrate, whether you celebrate, don't celebrate, whether you took time off, whatever that may be. But it's good to be back on the microphone and to have an awesome guest today. So Sadie, you have a brand new movie that just got released called The Beast Inside, and I watched it and I thought it was a really different take on possession movies. And I want to know what inspired you, because you didn't just act in this movie, right? You wrote it and you produced. So I want to know about what inspired you to write the movie and then eventually be in the movie, produce the movie.
Well, so I'll give you like a short version. First, I should say that I did the story by
Okay.
and the director Jim Towns wrote the script, and I gave extensive notes. I feel bad because it keeps being written. People keep saying that I completely co-wrote it, and that's not accurate. But basically, what happened is we actually were originally approached by Chuck Billy of the band Testament, who was looking for a horror film to be in and to put his band's music in. And so it was a very all of a sudden my publicist at the time, Eileen Shapiro, reached out and said, do you have a script? And Jim Towns and I had been sort of kicking around the idea of, after COVID, we're like, let's go shoot something. Let's just go shoot something. And I had this idea of, the fact there's a lot of mental illness in my family and health related and addiction. And I have an older son who's 23. And I thought, what if I gave him something from my bloodline? And so that kind of started this whole thing of the demon inside a mother and what she might do. And then I kind of got onto the idea of gosh, I'm sorry. I'm out of it today. I'm sorry.
It's all good. Take your time.
I kind of got on the idea that what if there's never been a self-exorcism movie, and something about that, when you're doing independent horror, you're always looking for that different spin on it. And I love exorcism movies. They're the only movies that really legitly spook me out, where I have a hard time sleeping. So it started from there. And then because of the Testament tie-in, we ended up doing the script. I gave Jim Towns the story. And then what started as a movie that was going to just be me in a hotel room, he wrote the hell out of the script. And I've worked with him before. He writes female characters really strong. But then the story kind of got bigger and bigger and grew into something that we were like, we need to put real money into this and really have it, this is a cool story. Then we didn't end up working with Testament, which is a bummer, but it's kind of cool because it got us to do it real quickly. And then we had to scramble and get the money again. And when you're making these films, it's funny because they all kind of fall in like dominoes, and then it stops and you have to pick up the pieces again and figure it out. So that's really where we went with it. And then it was just kind of, it's fun to live in that world because you realize how many parallels there are into actual life.
Yeah. I that was actually a question I was going to ask you, and you kind of covered it. That the movie wasn't just a possession movie in the sense that your character, Anne, or she's dealing with, and I guess we're gonna have to warn people. We're kind of spoiling. We're gonna spoil the movie. I hopefully we don't go into too much detail, but it is about a woman who she's getting it passed down. This demon is coming through each generation, and she now has the demon in her. But it didn't just, and she's trying to figure out how to exorcise this demon. But it wasn't just about the actual demon or the beast inside of you, and they didn't like put it in flashing lights, but it was definitely, I caught on that there was some generational trauma that they were dealing with, and you answered that question for me because that was my question, like, hey, was that intentional or was that more tongue-in-cheek? But you brought up the fact that you wanted to pass on something for your son to be proud of and for other people to understand, because that is a real problem that people have. You worry about your faults and or your things. I don't want to say faults necessarily, because we all have different things going on in our lives, but that whatever you're doing, your behavior might affect the next generation. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because that was something I was very curious about, if that was done intentionally, or if that was just an extra thing that I kind of caught and wasn't supposed to catch. So I found that cool.
Yeah, I think one of the things with the character Anne that was important to me is like, I didn't want to make it just a story about like, oh, it's mental illness. Cause I think when you're dealing with mental illness, normally addiction kind of ties in with that.
Yeah.
So, and I also didn't want the audience to feel like she was going to wake up and it was a dream. I wanted it to be like, this is a real demon. It's a real exorcist movie. Um, and so I think that was really important that we said that in both mental illness and addiction runs in family. And there's something kind of so like provocative to me about the length that a mom would go to. But I didn't want her to be a perfect mom. I didn't want, like, normally we'll see moms and they're like, crying, holding their son. And I don't know if a lot of times when you see women that are struggling with addiction and stuff, they're kind of have to be in their own selfish world as much as they're hurting for their kid.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't seen that really done often in film. It's like normally the girl, like, oh, I can't believe I have this problem. She's, and I wanted it to be a little tougher than that.
Yeah.
If that
Yeah. I
makes
thought
sense.
it does. I thought it was a good way. It brought more to the story than just the possession story. It was this other thing, and it was the combination of the two worlds. And I think it made it more than a horror movie. I mean, you can argue that's a horrific topic having to deal with, and because again, it happens in real lives. But I thought it was a good combo putting the two together. So
Cool.
what were some of the challenges that you faced producing a film? Because I know that I hear so many stories about money and change and finding places, and I want to hear some of that if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah, I'd love to share that. It's kind of crazy. Like I really loved producing. Like the producing part was really fun. You're right. Like, I got to be more as an actor. I don't always get to weigh in on things like locations and wardrobe and things. So I got to have my hands in sort of everything. I think obviously the money, like, I mean, I always say I want to do a documentary about raising money for a movie because it's a ridiculous thing. Like, yeah, people always say, like, well, how'd you get the financing? If you ask anyone how they get the financing, it's always the most ridiculous, crazy story filled with, lots of people saying that, oh, that's not a lot of money. I'll write you a check right now. And then that person goes away and then you got to find someone. Um, that's like a horror story unto itself. It's really, I think we had Soho Johnny Pascal, who plays the hotel manager in this, who he said he wanted to invest in a movie. So he did that, um, which was wonderful. And then we had Mario Reyes, who was a friend of my publicist at the time, Eileen Shapiro. So he put his money in. But I have to tell you, we had a whole other set of investors that we had this, I won't say his name, we had this lovely, lovely man who was invested in the movie, but he wanted to score the movie. And so that was sort of, a lot of times when people put money, as you probably know, into these movies, they want their, their sister in the movie, or they have real specifics. And sometimes that really works out. Like Johnny ended up being a really great actor. He was great to work with, and he really took his part serious. And we gave him this, crazy character with, as not to give it away, but maybe the weirdest sex scene.
Okay, I thought that was a weird meme. This is the same thing. We're like, that was kind of awkward. I mean, I knew what your character was trying to accomplish, but it was also like, man, he's got like all his clothes on, and like, I don't know, the whole thing was odd.
Well, Soho is a very interesting. So what happened? We had this scene written for actually Chuck Billy. I don't know if you're a fan of his, but he's like a
not sure who that is. Uh-huh.
So he's the lead singer of the band Testament, which is like a heavy metal band. So we had the scene written for him, and then when Soho came, Soho is like a very, and he lives in New York, of course. He owns all this property in Soho, and he's a bit of a philanthropist and a really sweetheart of a guy, but he's very quirky. So when we had to go back and sort of rewrite the character for him, Jim Towns has a very funny sense of humor. He's a big Joss Whedon fan, and we always kind of like that weirdness in a horror film, like just a little, and almost a little levity. So there was something about like this hotel, that motel that we shot at is actually in walking distance from my house, and I love it. And it's a very quirky place. Like people who stay at motels, who live there, or the managers, typically are really quirky people. And it's funny. So many people are like, why is he still wearing his damn hat during this sex scene?
That's what I said. He's fully clothed, like the hat and everything.
But the idea was that he didn't really. So, it's like this funny thing when you're doing a film like this, you're shooting it fast, and there's all these elements, of course. And the idea was he wanted to keep his hat on. He said, Soho doesn't lose his hat. Okay. This guy always has his hat on.
Yeah.
And I think that the big idea was like, he didn't really expect, and forces him into the situation, because she has this ulterior motive. And there was some talk about like, I didn't want it to be like Anne's cheating on her husband because she's drunk. Do you know what I mean?
So she was trying to. She was trying to accomplish something. She was
right.
Yeah.
So it was like there was talk, like originally we had more nudity in the script, but then it seemed a little like it cheapened it. So there was something kind of just like this. Let's make the sex scene really odd. We had some jump scares in it, and like it, for it to feel like, I've done a lot of sex scenes. Like we were like, let's make it not feel like a sex scene. Like we wanted that discomfort, that uncomfortable feeling of like, what was that? Like, why?
Yeah, it brought a little twinge of comedic element without like taking away from the story as well. And it kind of broke it up a little.
Yeah, like when he says, there's only, also the motel room is so small, there's only so much you could do in the room. So when he walks by the hotel room and he says, weird fucking job.
Yeah,
like,
that was
died, and all our screenings, the audience was like, he ended up being like my favorite character. I mean, in some weird way, because he was just so sort of like random, and I felt like it gave us that weird 70s creepy feeling without him being like, we also didn't want him to be the bad guy, which is why I think it was his idea, or Jim's so smart where he has him be sort of a Vicodin addict and his own problems. So maybe you forgive Anne for saying, I'm just going to get him out of his misery too. I don't know. That was the whole thing. A lot of this script, when we did it, I love Jim because he writes complicated characters. Like, Anne's not good or bad. She's just dealing with something. And, the husband's not perfect all the time. Like that was, he snaps at his sister. The sister has a little bit of a snootiness, but like originally in the script, it was going to be that the we originally were like, oh, okay, so the dad has a girlfriend or something. And then we were like, no, we didn't want it to be, we didn't want the girls to hate each other because of the man. We wanted it to be deeper than that. So
Yeah, and I actually at first thought that that was his girlfriend. It took me, and I thought they were doing that thing where they're like, "Oh, he's calling her his aunt," but it's really the dad's girlfriend. And then when they had the conversation at the car, and she was like,
yeah,
"Look," and she was like telling Anne, like being real with her, like, okay, like when she's figured out what Anne's going through, and she's like, "Look, I know you're going through some stuff, and I hope you're not passing it on to the son, and I'm worried about." Then I figured, oh, okay, that is for real, like his sister. So I think it would have been it was like a moment of like, even though they didn't exactly get along, there was a little bit of that whole like woman to woman thing going on between them, where
yeah.
she's like, look, I just want the best for my brother and for my nephew. So I thought I think that was a smart choice, not making it his girlfriend.
Yeah, you know what? And it's like one of those funny things because we added the scene at the park. And one of the reasons we added it is because I loved Danielle. Does such a great job as Meredith. Like, I was like, we need to see more of her. Like, we less of Anne and a little bit more, but I still, we did have feedback of like, oh, I was a little confused that even though we keep saying the aunt, I think those are those things that you go, oh, I guess I would have changed that and said it a little bit stronger at the beginning, you know. Uh, but I love Danielle. I think she does such a good job with the character, and Anthony is he's as kind as he is handsome, as he is sweet, but he's also really, really talented. He has like a realness where every time I watch it, I feel so bad for him.
Mm-hmm.
Like I actually am like, oh, he's trying so hard. And it's tough because you don't see those characters too much. So they have to still kind of exist. And I think Anthony does a good job without being a complete pushover,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
So you had your role had a lot of physical elements to it, throwing yourself around and you're dealing with a demon inside of you. Um how do you prepare for that? Because I know I've also seen you in Bus Party to Hell, and the same thing. A lot of physicality. What do you do to prepare for that kind of thing?
Oh, wow. Uh, yeah, you know what's funny? Best Buddy to Hell, I do the whole movie in like 2 feet. Like I legitly don't move. So I'm going to go back to that because I love that you saw that movie. So funny. God bless the Mahal brothers, but and uh, Rolf, who the director of it and the writer. But so the one thing about the Bus Party to Hell movie is I was supposed to be this demon who had all these bugs and things inside me, snakes and stuff. So the idea was that I was like literally jumping out of my skin, but at the same time I was also in heat because I'm all sexed up and need
Yeah.
to I need the virgin. So that was sort of something that's funny. I did a lot of movies where like I think I was very twitchy in the movie. So for a while I feel like that was something I would kind of like purposely let all my energy come out. Like normally as an actor, you're really still. And then I kind of did a couple of characters like that. And I realized, oh, well, I don't want to be like a one trick pony. So in some ways, I prepared exactly the same way for like Bus Party as I did, at least physically. Um, you have to like know what your character needs to be, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a little bit of like kind of just like jumping on the dance floor and doing it, and like there's that thing of like you can't be afraid to look stupid. Like there's going to be some people that are going to go, I would have done it this way. The exorcism thing was funny because I practiced in my bedroom, like in front of a mirror. Like
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
how can
because
I
you used your facial expressions a lot too in that.
yeah, I was like, I watched some YouTube videos of actual like exorcisms and then I remember I was rehearsing and I didn't tell my husband and he like comes in the bedroom and I'm like this. And he's like, what? I'm in like some lingerie thing. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm rehearsing. Get out, get out." So yeah, I think some of it, it's funny as an actor, like the most embarrassing thing is like when you're in front of the crew and you're in this small room, there's like 20 people, and you have to look at them and go, okay, guys, like they don't actually know what you're going to do. You got your boom guy. And there's a little moment of um, little embarrassment because you have to have some humility and be willing to maybe the director to go, that looks terrible. Don't do that. That's not what we want. But it's the whole like jumping into it and allowing yourself to
just do it. Like you said, just throwing yourself out on a dance floor.
yeah, I mean, and you also know that they're going to add, like Jim was really good because I kept saying to him, like, I hope this looks good. Like, we're watching the playback and he's adding like
The sound effects and the voice.
Yeah. Yeah, the sound mix, and we had the demon voice, which was really cool. There's something, so that's kind of the fun of horror films. Like, you don't normally get to do like that absurd and that heightened. It's like, I studied acting going to like Meisner, and they always say like, it's life or death circumstances. Well, horror is like beyond life or death. And, working with Vernon Wells, who actually just lost his home in the fire.
Oh, no. Great. Oh, my goodness.
I know. I talked to him about it. He's such a funny, like, a hardcore actor. Like, he's an actor. Like, he's been doing it his whole life. He's
in Commando, right?
Yes.
And I love that movie.
Mad Max, and like, he has a presence. If you met him and you didn't know who he was, you would know he lived an interesting life. He's and he's got a really sassy sense of humor. So what's fun is he's an actor like that you go head to head. The same thing with Lorraine Landon. She's fucking brilliant. Like she's a maniac cop. Like she's been doing it a long time. But she's willing to be like absolutely disgusting, and she does such a bang up job in the movie, and she was actually terrifying on set, and so much of her was okay with her physicality. Like, I mean, she spit in my face like many takes. It's like having all the actors kind of rise, you all start showing off a little bit. You're like, okay, all right.
Everybody's bringing their A game and one-upping.
Yeah. And Victoria DeMar, who plays the demon, is always on shooting. It's always like really cold, and there's something. She had like basically almost nude, but all this makeup on, and she's like creeping through the church and crawling over chairs. It's really fun. It becomes like this real, like playing like you're a kid. I always have that feeling where I'm like, what am I doing? It's 3 a.m. I should be home with my kid. And I'm like, putting in contacts. I can't see anything at all. And I'm like basically contorting myself.
Yeah. You mentioned that, you watched actual, what do you call them? You watched actual exorcism. So do you actually believe in like supernatural or paranormal, or have you had any spooky experiences of your own?
Gosh, I used to be a Jehovah's Witness. So when I was a Jehovah's Witness, like one of their beliefs, I haven't been for 20 something years, but one of their big beliefs is like about demons, and everything's like a demon's going to come into you. So I think for a long time, I really believed in demons. Like if I was home alone, I was scared of the dark until like a couple of years ago. Like it was absurd. I don't know. I have to tell you, I would be stoked right now if I saw a real ghost or had like a real demon experience, because then I would be like, you're like, no.
Yeah. If people aren't watching, I was shaking my head, but I'll let you finish because I'll give you my comments on that.
Well, I just think it would mean like, okay, then there is an afterlife for
Hmm.
sure, or there's aliens for sure, or there's something. I think it would change my whole opinion on life. But I'm such a skeptic too. I would be like, one time I swear to God, I'm at a restaurant and I was talking about something spooky, and the salt shaker with me and my girlfriend slides across the table, and we both went like, "Oh, what the fuck!" And then I picked up the salt shaker, and I just picked it up instinctually, and we were both just like dumbfounded. And there's like a little bubble of water underneath it. So I don't know how, like, but it obviously, like, it was from the water, and it just the
Yeah.
time. So I'd have to see, like, a demon would have to hit me in the face and be like, I'm a demon. Here I am. I'd be like, I don't know. Maybe that was the light. Maybe that was this. Maybe
Yeah.
I dreamt it.
Yeah,
But
I could
are you not
rationalize
a
stuff too.
demon person?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you not do you believe in?
No, you know what, I don't. And I've had that same thought sometimes where I'm like, well, maybe if like I experience something, then I'm also like, don't go inviting stuff, at least. Like it's cool. Like just leave it as is. I'm with you on the sense that like with like I think, religion, a lot of religions like use demons and stuff as a way to like scare us and keep us in line. And I don't personally buy into that. I don't care what people believe. Yeah, everybody, I'm a believer of, you choose to believe what you want to believe and just don't shove it on me, and I'm cool, and I won't shove my beliefs on you. But yeah, that's not something I'm inviting into my home. If I ever do experience it, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna definitely look at life differently, but I'm not going out of my way to find it. Or some people go to, the different haunts. I've gone on like haunted tours and I've visited haunted places, but I've never had an experience. But I also don't go out of my way to invite it in.
No. Well, here's what's so funny is can't do like a I can't do like a scary maze or not scary farm. I
Hmm.
lose my mind. I get so, I don't know, like I just get so frightened, and I feel like maybe from doing horror films I've learned to like trigger myself very quick to be, or just being an actor to be very emotional. So I get freaked out. But I did go on the tour on the Queen Mary
Hmm.
to go look for ghosts, and I was scared immediately. I was like, I can't do this. I can't go down the hall. I can't, like, it was so absurd. But gosh, I'm like Scully, or not Scully. I'm like, yeah, I'm like Scully or
From X
Mulder.
Files.
I want to believe. I want to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't it
It
be
would be
thrilling?
interesting, I guess. Yeah. But
I
do I
mean,
want to know? I don't know.
I know. Well, people always say like good demons, bad demons.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole balance and yeah.
Yeah, I did live in this place in Hollywood Hills that was from the 1920s. Our house is very old too, but it was in the Hollywood Hills. I lived in this house, and I always sort of like, if any place was haunted that I've ever lived, there was something about that house that like spoke to me. I can't describe it. I felt like this real kinship. And then there was always like a light going on and off, in the bathroom light, and everyone says that's a thing. And real quick, I stayed at an Airbnb once, and this is sort of a sad story, but it was the weirdest. There was something off on the energy, and there was like a door that was completely like locked, like a real lock. And I saw like paintings. The woman obviously had done these paintings, and they were all of like women with like stomachs, like hearts around the stomach and in chest and things. And then when I went to the bath, or when I was in the bedroom, there was a bathroom off of it. And I kept thinking it was really something, the energy was really bad. And that light in the bathroom kept coming on and off. And I was like, I'm just spooking myself out, girl. You're just spooking yourself out. So I go to the laundry room, and there's all like, she obviously had packed stuff away, like, and now renting it out as an Airbnb. And I looked at the books that she had packed away, So I was like, I wonder why she doesn't have these in the living room. And they were all books about having miscarriages and moving
Oh,
on
poor.
after divorce. And I was like, oh my gosh, she miscarried in the bathroom. Like it, and I'm not one that does jumps to that, but I was like, oh, that's why this house is sad. So I do think there's some kind of energy,
Yeah.
whether or not, I mean, you could definitely feel like, oh, whoever lived here and left here and now they're renting out for an Airbnb are very sad.
Yeah.
It's like it was a weird feeling. You know, sometimes you go into a space and you go, oh, this is not good. This is
Yeah.
not good. Um, but whether or not it's like a ghost, I would fucking lose my mind, but it would be great. I'd be telling everyone too. I'd be
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I saw a ghost. They're real. They're real. But then other people will tell you in like ridiculous stories, and I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's what makes it hard for me to believe because sometimes some people's stories are so out there. And I lived at one point. We'll bring it back in. We'll get back to some of your movies and stuff. I did
That's all
live. I lived in an old crematorium. I know it sounds like a weird thing. When I was in the service, I was overseas in Afghanistan, and one of the buildings that we lived in, and then eventually we weren't living in it anymore. They built us a new spot to live, but we were still working in there, and it was the walls were charred all over the place. It was an old. It originally was like a Russian hospital during that era. I don't go into like history lesson or anything here, and then um, various countries had come and gone through there. And when we were there, yeah, we didn't even know initially. And I remember looking and being like, why are the walls like they look like was this place burnt at some point? And they're like, oh, it was like a really crude crematorium at some point. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I figured if something ever like creepy was gonna happen, it would have happened there, and nothing did. So that kind of like added to my like disbelief. I'm like, okay, I think I'm good. But yeah,
Thank you for your
that would have been
service.
wild if something
Thank you for
happened
your
there. I would have.
service. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Oh
Though.
yeah. No worries. That's
How long?
it's an
How long
honor.
did you live there?
Oh, I was. It was. How long was I? What? I'm sorry.
How long were you living in the crematorium?
Oh, we were probably in there for about. We were living in it for only about a month, but I worked there. That was like where our office space was for the entire, and I was there over a year. So, yeah, I was in there almost every day. If we weren't out in the field or out doing other things, that was kind of where we killed time when we didn't have anything going on. So yeah, it was. Luckily, nothing happened. I kept thinking something might happen. So, but I'm with you on I'm with you on things too. I don't like jump scares, but I still find myself going to like the Queen Mary Harbor. I went to the Dark Harbor. I go to Knott's. I do all those.
But you don't.
I think
You know,
I don't
they
like the
say
jump scare. The jump scares are what get me, but the scenery doesn't get me.
oh, I don't. I always think, what if somebody? I'm surprised there's not like a million movies about this. I know that there were some in like the 70s or I always think, how do we know that there's not like really, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm like running and someone's chasing me with a real butcher knife
Yeah.
and everyone's like, ha ha ha, that's just a character. I feel like sometimes when I play a lot of, obviously I play a lot of antagonists, so I'm not always the one being chased, but I will say there's something really crazy when you're shooting and you're like screaming for help, you're crying on the ground, and it's like insane. And then the director will say cut, and then everyone like gets up and they like go eat, or they're going to the bathroom, and you're just sort of like I just have been like sobbing and crying, and that and you're just, everyone's just standing there watching you. There's something very Black Swan about that. Like
The,
it's,
getting out that transitioning from that because you were giving it your all. Yeah, having
well,
to go
no, I mean, no
from one
one's
to the
helping
other.
you. So you're, when else are you in like a room with, there's something very, that's the weird thing about horror. You're in this room shooting with all these people. Like when I did Wrong Turn, there's like 100 crew, and you're doing like this insane thing in front of all of these people, and but no one's helping you, and it's weird. Like when do you have a case where you're like begging for your life in front of
Yeah.
a bunch of people, and they're kind of like, they're standing there doing their job. It's a really weird thing. I've always like sort of that like had a little bit of like, that's a nightmare you keep asking everyone to help you and people are just staring at you. I mean, now we live in a time where this is happening where people are like recording it on their cell phones, which to me is would be more almost more terrifying than having something bad happen would be a lack of a response from anyone around you. That's terrifying to me, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's talk about some other movies. So you said you were in Wrong Turn and you're in Wrong Turn 6. What have been some of your favorite roles that you've been in?
Um, well, I just did a movie called Texas Nightmare with Michael Marino as the director, and that it's very like Lynch kind of horror film, and it was so different. I'm actually excited to see the movie to see how it all comes together. I played like a little nod to The Shining, just a little of an author who's like kind of losing her mind, has a real alcohol addiction. Um, I loved, you know, Wrong Turn 6 was like such a big deal for me in my career. It's doing a huge studio film like that and being one of the leads, shooting it in Bulgaria. Um, that was my first time working with a crew that English isn't their first language. So one thing that I really loved is like I got to really be immersed when we were shooting. We also shot for like 30 days. So um but like it was like in a whole other world. When I played Goddess Ishtar in Blood Feast,
Mm-hmm.
directed by Marcel Walsh, that was really awesome because like I felt like I was in a totally different world. Like it was surreal because I was in Germany, but we shot a lot of it in a sex dungeon that
What?
normally was I know
The
Germany.
ending?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah.
Like so in that room that's kind of like this the all black room and then I think they do like they switch it to an all white room, but most of it was in like um Fuad's lair where we're having the feast. They in Germany they have these like sort of real underground like in the like basement sex dungeon, and this was I'm being very gross here, but this was like a real place. So you would go in. I mean, it was super clean, which is weird because it was like a
Okay.
golden shower. So it was like a golden
Oh.
shower gay club where people would put their stuff in a locker. I mean, we weren't there when it was open. They put their stuff in the locker and then go in the club. There's no windows, nothing. And there was like chains and toilets hanging and like
Oh.
grates to clean everything. And yeah, you can fill in the rest. But it was just like a very creepy, weird thing. Germany's really, have you been to Germany? I'm sure you
I've just passed through. I didn't spend like I couldn't talk about an experience there other than I passed through.
Yeah, well, it's like very green and beautiful, but then you're like walking along and you're by a school and then there's like a cigarette machine like right outside the school. It's as if it's like a mailbox or something. Like
Yeah.
there are lots of different it's just an interesting
That's
it
it's
was
that way in a lot of parts of Europe. There's a thing, I mean, we we here are more I don't know prudish in America.
yeah.
We tend to try to suppress nudity and stuff. And I mean, you can just be watching MTV. I think when I was in Bulgaria, I did spend a lot of time in Bulgaria,
Oh,
in
what
Sofia,
part?
in the capital. Yeah, it's beautiful. The people are
Isn't
really
it
nice. Yeah,
beautiful?
yeah, it's different. It's
Yeah.
different. I won't go into too much detail, but yeah, I mean, I was watching MTV and it was like, Euro MTV and it's like, oh, there's a Justin Timberlake video and there's just girls with their boobs out like it's nothing. I mean, here you wouldn't I mean, we don't have MTV anymore. This is in the earlier 2000s. Granted, people hardly watch music videos, but you wouldn't catch a music video in the middle of the day with a girl who's topless. I mean, you have to go to your cable channels for that or something. So, yeah, there's definitely a lot of differences. Even like in Amsterdam, I was walking around during the day, and then you find out later that night, like I'm walking through the same area, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is the red light district. We were walking through the red light district during the day, and we had no clue. You just would have thought it was like houses and the restaurants are right there and there was kids walking through there. So I mean, there's definitely cultural changes in other places compared to America when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's not super shocking hearing that about that dungeon. It's shocking to know that you guys filmed that. That made it, that must have added to it for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, you want to talk about energy being in a space and but then we also shot in a 1950s diner that was an American diner that was in Germany, like in the middle of a forest. It was very like all it was off of the road, but sort of like a forest, yeah. Bulgaria. Sophia was when I went there, it's so funny because I had never been to Eastern Europe and I was there, of course, by myself, but I was at, staying at the hotel there and with the studio and everything. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna go and have like coffee. So I go to the coffee place, and first of all, you can't read any signs, so it's not like you can
It's all in
go.
Cyrillic, yeah.
Yeah, it's like trying to read Chinese. And I walk into this coffee store, and the woman who comes to the counter, it looks like Claudia Schiffer. And she looks really, really depressed, but like stunning. And I was like, wow, she's beautiful. And then another woman brings me coffee. Again, looks like a supermodel. And then I look around my first day there, I'm like, everyone here is a supermodel and they don't even know it. Like they love America. But it was it's like this strange thing because it's such a beautiful country and kind of broken and beautiful. And
Yeah.
that was my first time I experienced the change of weather, like because I'm a Californian, so I never experienced like winter to spring. And there's something when you're shooting these movies, like they become, especially if you're shooting it out of Los Angeles, it becomes sort of like I always look back and I have such a connection to every character. And some of it is because of the wild times I had shooting or like some kind of mind blowing thing. You don't always get rich off of these movies, but you do make like a lot of friends. Or for me, I end up missing my characters a lot. Like I feel like every now and then I'll read something and I'll think about my characters like oh I wonder what she'd be doing now or something. I feel real. I just read what's the wonderful actress from Midsummer? How do you say her
Oh,
name?
is it
Lauren,
Florence Pugh? I'm
yeah,
probably saying her last name wrong.
she said when she left filming Midsummer, she was in the plane, or she was on the plane going to do another film, and she started crying because she thought about her character, just that she just like created this character and left her in the field to like have all this horrible stuff. And I was like, I bet so many people read that and think, oh God, she's being such an actor. But it does feel that way. You're like, I created this thing inside me and then I just abandoned her. She's just off being tortured or doing something bad. Sometimes you're like, I love this character. I love playing. It's so fun to be evil. It's so fun on camera to get to just like conjure up, like really get in there. And I really like getting in someone's face and being like, let's go, let's dance.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's your role in The Beast Inside and in Bus Party.
yeah,
Your
I mean,
characters are those way.
yeah, I always get to have sort of like, this great turn. And then I try to make my villains different. So it's not like, oh, she's doing her villain shtick again. But it is so fun. It's fun to live in that space, but like sometimes you're just, I did this movie, Megan. I had so much fun filming it in Italy, and it was great. And the crew and the cast, Randy Wayne, amazing. But when it was done, I was like, okay, I don't want to know about Megan anymore. She's a fucking cuckoo and I'm done with her. And there is a lot of that feeling of like, uh, but
What do you
sometimes
think about the current state of female-driven horror films?
I mean, I have no complaints. I feel like I just saw The Substance and I was like, you know what? we're here, ladies. It's kind of funny because they're still repeating the same narrative as that, oh, when you're 40, Hollywood's done with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? All these actresses are in their 50s and 60s and they're doing these great roles. I mean, if anything, it's kind of funny in horror. Women are winning. Like, we are definitely playing these complex characters. We're not just the girlfriend. Sometimes I'm like, the fun thing about horror is it's really a female genre. We're no longer just like tits running through the forest.
Mm-hmm.
Even like 15, 16 years ago, when someone would say scream queen, they would be like, they would be afraid that it was like a derogatory thing because, and I'm like, well, now there's not a lot of, all of the characters seem to be very empowered. When a movie's not like that, I forgive it because it's not, the genre itself is so great for women because even when they're relying on a man, they're also like, I think it's a really positive thing. We're in a positive direction with it. And women watch a lot of horror. Like, I mean, I'm more likely than my husband to say, let's watch a scary movie, especially like a new modern movie. Um, we're also like anxiety ridden, but I think it's like, you feel like you conquered when you watch a scary movie. You're like, all right, I'm okay.
Yeah, that's exactly why I watch them. It's a way for me to get any anxieties I have out. I always joke with everybody. I'm like, oh, like scary movies are like that's my therapy. Like, I get to deal with fears and like, the boogeyman isn't real. Like there's real boogeyman out there that I'm actually scared of. So I can watch scary movies and it's a way to get that kind of get some of those jitters out and get some of that anxiety that you're dealing with.
Yeah, and now I think because of A24 and Demi Moore and The Substance, and I think we're also doing kind of avant-garde stuff. It's like, I was excited. I wouldn't say that The Substance is like my favorite movie of all time, but I was like, oh, we can do anything in this genre. Like, it was so over the top and so kind of cheeky. And because of the horror films are so successful right now, I feel like they're allowed to do things that aren't the norm, like in other genres that they'd say, well, you can't do that. That's too much. You can kind of go completely wild. Even like, did you see Men?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, so it's an A24 movie, and
No, I haven't heard of that one.
oh, you got to see it.
Okay, I'm gonna write it down right now.
Yeah. What is your favorite subgenre of horror?
I'm kind of old school. You're talking about like boobs and running, but that's like I initially started with just like 80s
Yeah.
cheesy slashers. Those are I think I can just put them on and they completely entertain me. So that's probably my favorite. But
Yeah.
within the horror genre, I mean, I'm open to watching anything. I watch them even if they're more on the sci-fi side. I don't care if they're more horror comedy. I like them all. But that's probably where I originally started. I mean, when I first saw Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a kid, I was like blown away by it, and then I ate up all the other stuff after that.
Yeah, those are the movies I like too. I mean, I wouldn't say slashers are my favorite subgenre, but I mean, look, Scream scares the shit out of me. Like, it
Really?
scares me. Like, where I have to cover my eyes, and
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. But that anything with like a butcher knife or anything, I'm just like, ah. Yeah, but they're like delicious. They're very delicious, and
I love
there
that.
is something about, you normally have your protagonist who is getting stabbed at and she still has to get up. She's still the tough girl. Like, I mean, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Like, it's a fucking good movie.
And they're doing another one.
I know.
What
The whole cast.
are you waiting for? Yes.
Yeah, they're also doing Final Destination.
Oh, another man. There's so many. You know, I haven't watched all. I got lost in that franchise after I stopped watching some of them. I know I'm probably getting some haters out there right now, but I haven't watched all of them.
Oh,
Those ones mess. Those ones mess with me. I still see the logs on like. I'm still behind certain vehicles. I'm like, nope. I'm gonna get into another lane and get ahead.
it's so genius. I know. I know the creator of the movies, and it's so funny because everyone just sends him that meme all the time. But yes, I
Mm-hmm.
would never ever I would never be I would never let a truck with logs be in front of me. I think about it every time. I mean, that
Or even like chairs, equipment. I'm like, nope, nope, not gonna be behind this one.
or the tanning bed. She dies in the tanning bed. Yeah,
Luckily, I
there's
don't
like
tend.
those movies, it's kind of funny because you can watch a ton of new movies. I will say, like, there's all these that's the difference. I will say, and this, I could get haters for this, but like the A24 movies are really good and they're much more like, intelligent in a certain way, but they don't always stick with you image wise. As there's like certain movies that you can like, that you bring up like all the time, The Descent. I think about that opening scene is with her husband. Ah, um, they're in their simplicity. That's what's so scary. Sometimes, I have another movie coming out, uh, or that I just shot called Dead Bloom, and really cool, like a body modification horror. And I'm sort of getting into that genre of it. I guess Substance was definitely that.
Body horror, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it scares me though. Um, but it's sort of like you can't look away. And when we were shooting Dead Bloom, we had uh, uh, the director is a dad and his son, and they're both artists, as their other job, and musicians, Dominic and Damon Paris. And when we were shooting it and just like seeing the screen and we're like going into the blood and it's all splashing out, there's a different thrill with that. That's not so, it's not so like visceral, I guess. It feels differently. It's more just like, I don't know. I feel like it's more just like, oh God, like creepy. Whereas, yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, like I would love to do a movie like that, actually. The idea, like, I like when actresses are like spitting. When they're freaking out so bad.
Full of stuff, yeah.
Yeah, that they're just like, there's something about that it's like, Shelley Duvall in The Shining, like she's losing her shit. That
Hmm.
makes me scared. When I watch something, I go, oh my God, this is so scary. I can't help it. Um, I enjoy watching actresses that you can tell are really losing their mind.
That's cool. Yeah, so that means, so if you could go back in time, if you could take any role, you totally would have been I think it's Sally, right? Oh my god, I've watched the movie a million times. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you could be her at the end, right?
Oh,
Wouldn't that have
yeah,
been
I
cool?
would. Oh, you know what's funny though is I think I would rather do The Shining. Um,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
uh, because I just love that movie so much. Because as an actress, the one thing about Texas Chainsaw Massacre is like that's a messy movie. That's a that's a lot
It
of
looked
days. That's a lot of days bathed in blood. Like, I think those are movies when it's all done, you're like, I'm fucking so glad I did that movie. But it's not while you're shooting it, there's a lot of misery involved. It's
yeah. I think that's what made it scary because it looks like grimy and it looks humid. Like I don't know where they actually filmed it at. Like it did not look comfortable for anybody involved.
yeah, have
On
you
top of,
ever
like you
been
said,
like
the main girl
doused?
having been full of stuff.
Yeah, like doused in fake blood. I mean, you know, there's it's actually, well, I don't want to give it away, but in Dead Bloom, I wasn't covered in blood the whole movie.
Okay.
And it was so funny because I sort of felt a little useless at times. I was like, oh, I don't have any blood on me right now. Like I'm not spinning this movie like covered in stuff. And it's a little, I mean, look, I'm talking to a military person. What what was your title? Like
Um,
it
what do you mean? Like my rank and
nothingness.
all that?
No.
Oh, I don't want to share any of that.
Oh,
I'm not.
okay. So I
Yeah, but
just in respect, I'm like, you know,
oh no, you don't have. No, I don't. I don't.
yeah. But
You don't
that's
have. I'm
so
not somebody where you have to thank me and tell me. And I don't. I don't go. I
no,
know I
I'm
brought it
just
up, but
saying
we're.
like that must be a head trip because you're dealing with stuff. And sometimes when we're shooting, we're like it feels like we're in war. It's 110 degrees. We're in these costumes that like our wardrobe is really hot. And you know, anybody else has like that fight or flight that kicks in, but you have to sit in it. So it does, I mean, we're not in like real danger, but it does sort of turn into where you're like, this is insane that we're doing this. Like,
Yeah, but I mean that's part of being a good actor. You have to put yourself in that state of mind, right? To
yeah,
go to like you said, how maybe that's why it scares you when you go to different events that involve scaring because you're so used to having to be on point so quick.
oh yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah, there's like the trigger, you know, if all of a sudden someone says, I'm going to chase you, I'm like, don't do that. I don't want you to, like,
yeah.
don't tickle me, don't chase me. And it's funny, 'cause I thought that's a normal reaction, but like my son, my 2-year-old, when I go to tickle him, I'm tickling him and he's cracking up and he'll keep going more, more, more. And I remember as a kid, like not wanting to be tickled, not wanting to be chased. And, um, you know, I guess it just is like a difference of like, I do not want someone to jump out at me in real
Yeah,
life.
no, I don't like that at all either. Yeah.
Yeah.
So just a few more questions so we don't take up too much more of your time. So going back to the Beast Inside, what do you hope audiences take away from that film?
Gosh, this is gonna sound so like like basic, but I really when we made that film, I kept saying to everyone, my first thing is I just want it to be fun. I'm not like a big I don't like films with messages. I like
Hmm.
if you pick up the message and it touches you, that's really cool because it touched, you know, doing the film or when we went through and wrote the story and everything, it meant something to me. Like, you know,
Hmm.
there's a couple times in the film, like, you know, when I'm saying goodbye to Vernon, like I when we were filming it, like I burst into tears. Like I actually burst into tears. They said cut, and I said, "Oh, I finally get to like, you know, cry because it meant there was so much that it meant to me about being a mother and you know, handling your demons, but not particularly always doing them and doing that in the most healthy way." Um, but above all, that's why my husband actually did the rap song at the ends. He wrote an original rap song, and I kind of loved it because I wanted it to feel like, you know, back in the day when you watch a horror film, it's just fun. Like at the end, you're
Hmm.
like,
It just cut and it cut to just like a total different. You're like, oh, I didn't know that song was coming. It was different.
yeah, I just wanted it to be like this doesn't have to be. I know that we're in a time where like at the end of some movies they're very deep or you know, you're left with dread. I wanted it to be like we have some fun jumps in the movie and I kind of wanted it to be where people go, "You know what? That was cool. That was fun." Or you know, it's
Even
not
the
so
ending had that little the piece, and without giving the movie away about the son, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, and then right when you're having enough time to think about it, the music comes in. So I think it added to it.
oh
Being
good.
you didn't expect that rap song to start.
Yeah, and it was like there was some debate because about maybe doing this like kind of ironic country song or you know something like which is like an A24 thing. They play like a 1950s song at the end or
Hmm.
you know like something cheeky. But I think honestly my biggest thing with horror is I want people to be like, that was fun or that was crazy or you know what? That was interesting or I just um right now I feel like everyone takes entertainment so intensely and above all like horror is supposed to feel like an escape. So I hope people see it and go, you know what, that was fucking a decent little indie film and it was fun. And if you like exorcism films, it at least did something different. Like we tried to turn it on its head. And it was really important to me that every scene had some kind of jump or creep factor. Um, I do feel like when I do these indie films, sometimes I'm like, well, if we don't have big budgets, sometimes people talk too much in their films and so much dialogue, and you're like, nothing's happened. And then it's too dark, and you're like, when's something going to happen in this movie? And I wanted this movie to feel like things were happening and each scene kind of moved along. And when it's done, my aunt, the nicest compliment my aunt said, well, I love the movie, it's one of my favorites you've done, but it was so short. I said, well, it was 85 minutes, or I think 84 minutes. And she's like, yeah, way too short. I said, no, that's a good length of a horror
That sweet
film.
spot, yeah.
Yeah, I said, that's like, we were going for like 82 to 85 minutes. And but I said, well, that's good. You want people to be done with it and go, oh, I could have watched some more. So yeah, it's such like a basic bitch response. Like, I hope you had fun, but I really,
No,
I wanted it to be
that's a
fun,
great answer.
like,
Yeah.
I want it to be fun enough that if someone sees, like, one of my favorite indie horror is Frozen, the one where they're stuck in the ski lift. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't. I've heard a lot about it, and I honestly haven't seen that one. I need to check it out. It's on, I have like a long list of to be read, to be watched,
Yeah.
and that's one of
You have
them.
to see it. I love it. I think it's like very fun. I also saw this really a foreign film called The Glass Coffin about this girl stuck in a limo. It's a little sexually weird because it's a foreign film, so they go there. But I loved it. I thought it was so good. So yeah, I kind of like films that are like fun and ridiculous. I really want to see, this is on my list, the one Fallen, where they're stuck on the tower way up high.
Is that a newer one?
Yeah, I just
I
saw
don't
it.
think I've seen the trailer. Is there a trailer just came out for that one?
Yeah, it's been out, but they were charging like $20 for like a year
Oh,
for it.
for to stream it. No, I don't
Yeah.
think I have. See, you've got me a whole. I have a whole list now
Oh,
of
good.
movies that I'm
I'm
writing
giving
down
you a
to
list.
check out. There's so many, especially a lot of indie ones, like you said. A lot of you can't keep up with them.
Yeah, there's a lot of content. That's the one thing that's like pretty difficult. And like when I did Bus Party to Hell, Redbox was still out. So a lot of people
Okay.
saw that movie. That was like a stoner horror film, and very gratuitous on obviously the sex, but like it's really hard to get people to find your movie now. That's the hardest thing. And I've also become like the person where I'm like, did you rate the movie on IMDb? Rate the movie after you see it. And if you liked it, tell people. There's a lot of content, which is fun, but it is hard to find the content that is worth watching, or find your audience.
Yeah, I find myself on Prime and on Tubi going, spending a lot of time going looking through stuff, because yeah, there's so much out there, and there's not really like an efficient way to find them, but word of mouth is usually always a good way to find things. So 2 more things. Fargo Christmas. I saw that on your IMDb, and that was a total different take. And I know we're here because this is a horror podcast and we've only talked about the horror genre, but it's really cool to see you doing something with a little bit of a different take, more of a drama. I think she was kind of a little comedic, your character. So,
Yeah.
I know we're a horror genre, but hey, people should check that one out. That was a cute little Christmassy Hallmark vibes film. It's all good. It's all good.
I'm
It's
so
all good.
excited that you saw Fargo Christmas, because I'm so sad about the production issues on it, because if you were to say my favorite character, I loved her so much.
Really?
Yeah,
And so you can't. So then it's not supposed to be released anywhere. Did I find it somewhere I shouldn't have found it?
no, they did it on YouTube, and then it wasn't there anymore. They had such sound issues. They put in snow, but then it didn't match continuity, and it was like such a sweet story, but a little odd.
Yeah, it has a little bit of disjointness to it.
Yeah,
but it was entertaining. I was watching it for you, so.
Oh, thank you.
You know.
It's so funny, because if I had to say like one character that I loved her. Was so obsessed with like the characters like coarse sweetness and like plucky charm. And like, if there was one character, if you're like, hey, what would you like to show up for the next 6 years and do a series? Even though it's not a horror film, I would have loved that because I loved her. And I'm really sad that the production dropped the ball on it, because there was a lot of the actors really were fun to work with. And it's crazy. It was Ed Asner's last movie, and you don't know what you're getting. Like, to go into producing, you never know what you're getting. That's why I wanted to produce, but now I know how hard it is.
Yeah.
You know.
All right. So, what future projects do you want to tell people about that they can look out for? And also, will you be attending any conventions?
Oh, I have to do some conventions. I'm friends with Felissa Rose, and she's always like, you should do love her. She's amazing. She's actually like the nicest human in real life.
Yeah, I met her. And I wrote a whole blog post about it. How she was so genuine.
She's
and
genuine.
She didn't come off as fake at all. And we living in SoCal, I've run into like A-list celebrities. I've run into D-list celebrities. I don't treat them any different. Like,
Yeah.
and she was super genuine though.
It's crazy. She does those conventions every weekend. She's somewhere else, and she's a terrific mom. She has 3 kids that are all amazing, and she never once. So she's in Texas Nightmare with me, and I've been friends with her for years, and she never once says, "Oh, I have to go to Texas again, or I have to go to, I'm doing a convention in the middle of Utah." She never acts like that. I'm always like marveled, because she has like a real sweetness and a real gratitude. Like, she never says, "Oh God, I have to watch Sleepaway Camp again." I've never heard her complain. It's kind of insane. I've told my husband before, I'm like, I've never met someone who's so grateful all the time. She's always like that, and there's nothing fake about it. She's really a wonderful person, and you should see her in A Hard Place. I have a small cameo, but she's the lead. She is so good in it. It's just, she's really, really wonderful. Jason Horton is the director and the writer, and she is so good in this character. I'm like, gosh, sometimes you forget when you see someone a lot. Like, she's a strong actress, and she blows it out of the park. Like, when you're watching the movie, you're like, oh, there's the superstar. That's someone who's been doing it a long time, who makes it so good. She's great. Yeah, so I'm in A Hard Place. I don't have a big part, but it's a fun part. So that's out. And then Dead Bloom will be out. Please the Beast Inside. And then Texas Nightmare with Michael Moreno directed it, and he wrote it. And James is my co-star in it, along with Eva Hamilton, and then Lou Temple, who's really a very interesting actor. And gosh, I'm like, I know I have something else coming out, but those are ones I'm really excited about. And I'm excited to see what happens with them. It's sometimes I'm like waiting. Dead Bloom, I'm really excited about. I'm like, let's see it. I can't wait to see it. I'll be sitting at the premiere going like, oh God, please be good.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing Texas Nightmare, and I'm adding Dead Bloom to my list to look forward to seeing too.
Oh, good.
Where can people find you on social media or anywhere else you want to be found?
Instagram, / Sadie Katz, SADIE KATZ, and I'm trying to get more active on X. I'm still calling it Twitter, but
Yeah,
I am trying to be better at that. In Facebook, you could always say hi, but I have a lot of friends, and sometimes I get lost in there. But Instagram is good, and I try to keep up with my stories, and sometimes it's pictures or memes, or just it's a little all over. But and I update on different projects I'm doing. that aren't just horror, all over, all different genres.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Sadie. We really appreciate having you on the podcast. It's been great interviewing you and hearing all your stories and about your movie, The Beast Inside, and your upcoming movies. So thank you. And to all our listeners, thank you guys for checking out this podcast again. You can check us out online at our Instagram is at Dreadful Dialogue Podcast. Our website is dreadfuldialogue.com. And thank you guys and have a good one. Bye, Sadie.